Success is not by accident, it is by design. And welcome to the Success by Design show, where we bring you the stories and formulas of successful people that have designed their own success. And today is a very special program because we're talking about selling yourself to success and also some selling tips. Now, there's an expert that I know that knows how to turn selling into buying.
You got it.
Trevor, thank you for coming on the program. Trevor Wilkins. And you are the author of this book.
30 years of sweat went into that, yes.
30 years. Well, yes. So we can probably see it's heavy.
Yes, that's right.
So how did you get into this? I mean, you're a sales expert and you teach people how to sell. So how did you get into this business?
Well, when I left the army, which was less about selling and more about telling, I went to the stock exchange, and there we were selling stocks and shares, and I spent the next 27 years selling stuff to people. And I worked my arse off. I worked so hard. It was not good for my health, it wasn't good for my family. And what was worse, I saw a lot of my kids, but there was nothing left. And all of that time, I made a lot of money, and I worked pretty well at it. But I spotted some people who were around me, some people who worked for me, some people worked with me, and some of the people I worked for, they were disgustingly healthy, disgustingly relaxed, but actually making just as much and often more money than me. And I thought, there's some kind of magic juice here. And I thought, I want some of that.
You want some of that juice?
Yeah, well, and I want some of the juice back. You know, because it's hard. And I think salespeople are the worst people on earth for selling themselves in terms of the pizzazz they show. They always say, oh, selling's a bit special, you know, you've got to be like me and Alfonso, you know, you've got to be full of yourself, you've got to be full of self-confidence. It's not true. And I sat down, I'm an engineer by background, and I thought there must be a process here. And I modelled the best of the best. And it took me about 3 or 4 years, at the same time as I was being a sales director. I was getting around the world, and I modelled the way that people did it, and I discovered that actually it is extremely simple. And that's really all I've done, is I've created a process, and the process does some very good things to the way people feel, which is actually the most exciting part. But that's really how I got into it. It was a desire to have a better life for me, for my girls, and for my friends.
Now, I think we're always selling. I mean, selling is important. We're either selling an idea or selling something to our spouse. We're always trying to sell something, right? Is it important for someone to know just the basics of sales?
Well, you see, when we run our courses, we have certain words that are banned, like closing and various things like that, old classic sales words. And one of the words I ban is selling, because it's all about creating a buyer. If I'm influencing my wife to go on holiday to Halifax, I've got to see the problem from her point of view. I've got a very good reason for going to Halifax. I'm really keen to go, but you've got to put that behind you. And that's what kids should be taught this in school. If you're influencing somebody to buy an idea or to buy you as a service, to mow the lawn or something like that, you've got to see the whole process from the buyer's point of view. And that's the fundamental foundation to everything we do. Once you're able to do that, and it's not simple, because most people, particularly if you've got a quarterly target, you know, your mortgage is going to blow you away, or your marriage is going to go down the tube if you don't make your target. That's a pressure, and I felt that. I don't know whether you have, but it's a killer. But if you've got those sort of pressures, you tend to think about yourself, got to make the target. And moving across the other side of the table is probably the most important thing that people can do.
So, because the theme of the show today is selling ourselves. But not only that, selling ourselves to success. Now, from your point of view, is this possible? And is it possible for everybody?
Well, I say, and the book says it quite frequently, there is really no difference in influencing people to buy, and that's the new phrase, influencing people to buy. So
not convincing.
We don't say selling, we don't do convincing. We could talk about that for a long time, but we haven't got time. But I want, when people move away from our classes, they are knowing how to influence people to buy. But here's the thing, influencing people to buy an idea, a product, my pen, a service, me mowing your lawn, the idea that you become my distributor. And not only do you become my distributor, but I can use your warehouses to store my stuff in. The idea you employ me. I teach a lot of students and young entrepreneurs and people who've said, okay, I've given up being an entrepreneur, I want to get a real job. Selling yourself is the other thing. And in each case, you're influencing somebody to buy, and there's some very fundamental rules which we can talk about, but that's what it comes down to.
I really want to get into that, but also I wanted to point out, like, you'll be selling yourself to your spouse, your potential future spouse.
Absolutely.
And that's a whole other...
That's a tough one. Well, there's a friend of mine, he does actually specialize in using the same techniques that I have.
So you have some techniques that are very, that I can learn from?
Yeah, I think the key thing is they're not hints and tips. Hints and tips, you can go and buy 100 sales books, go and look at 100 videos. You've got to fundamentally look at two things. The first one's confidence. Until somebody has the confidence, then they're not going to be rejected, they're not going to look idiots, and they're not going to be seen to be too aggressive. Nobody's even going to start. People like you and me, we're bad at that because people think, I could never be like Alfonso. He's so full of pizzazz. But actually, we're our own worst enemies. One of the best salespeople I ever had, she was a really boring geologist.
Wow.
Really boring geologist. She was selling very high-tech software because she sat down, she worked out what would make people buy it. She worked out what people would take away from buying that software. And she was just a really nice person. No aggression, no pizzazz, none of that salesy stuff. She was brilliant. She made
just logical.
Just logical, and she was interested. And that's kind of one of the key things. If anybody wants to take a hit and tip away, you've got to become or be truly interested in the person on the other side. I'll give you an example. We were selling a big complicated banking system to some Dutch guys, and I was shuttling backwards and forwards between London and Rotterdam, and I was focused so on the software that we were selling. We were installing it and testing it. I completely forgot. We all learn most from our mistakes. I completely forgot to think about what the buyer, the actual treasurer of this organisation. And one day we were sitting having a beer, and he started explaining to me what was important to him. I thought, this could be a subtle hint on his part. And I suddenly realised that that's the point at which you really have to start from. What is in it for them? And we got the deal 2-3 days later after I had this sudden resounding change in realising what was going on. So that's an important dynamic.
That's incredible. Now you have something here for me. You brought an experiment, or are you going to put me through some training?
I'm going to connect your brain up, and we'll reprogram your brain. There's quite a lot of brain reprogramming goes on. No, it's just a little bit of fun. We have a lot of fun on all our trainings because it's very easy to stand in front of a PowerPoint and tell people. Right from the very first moment, I get people jumping around, doing stuff, and not stupid stuff like waving their hands in the air. It's all to do with finding out how you get people to buy a few. So let me ask you a question. Do you drive a car?
Yes.
What sort of a car do you drive?
Right, Mercedes ML.
Mercedes ML, which one? 350?
The 350.
So what made you buy that rather than any other car?
Well, growing up, I always thought that would be a successful kind of car.
Okay, so for you, it was the way it looked. So you could drive around in a Mercedes and you could feel good.
It would make me feel good, yeah.
So it sounds like a pretty strong buying driver, and that's one of the things we talk about, a buying driver. We don't talk about sales, we talk about buying driver. So a buying driver for you was status and how good you felt. And that's perfectly legitimate because I feel the same way.
And
was there any other reason?
And plus, it doesn't break down.
It doesn't break down?
It's German.
So what happens when things break down?
You got to put money out of your pocket to fix them.
So you want to save some money. So you had to put some money up front to save some money later on. Any other reason for buying an ML350? Do you drive fast, Alfonso? You look like a fast driver.
I'm not a fast driver.
Well, I'm a fast driver. And I must admit, and I've had a few cars in my time, never crashed any, but a big driver for me is how good I feel in driving the car itself. So it's the same idea of state, that's what we call it, that I feel good, but for you, it's to do with how good I feel in this because I feel successful. For me, it's just a sheer physical pleasure of driving it. What else you bought recently? You look like a man who buys stuff.
I buy real estate.
Real estate? Okay, so for what purpose do you buy real estate?
For retirement.
Ah, right, okay. And is it cheaper to buy real estate now for retirement than later on?
Absolutely.
So you're saving money there, aren't you? That's pretty cool. Are you going to make some income maybe? If you decide not to use that real estate for retirement, would you sell it and make a profit?
Absolutely.
Cool, that sounds pretty good. Anything else you bought? Have you bought anything recently that saved you a bit of time?
I did buy time management course.
Oh right, good lord! Did it work? They
What's
don't
that?
always.
Every little bit counts, right?
Well, I mean, one of the things I find most common is entrepreneurs like yourself and me. We spend a lot of time doing admin. There's a lot of people out there who sell outsourced admin, and quite often they'll try and sell it to me how cheap they are, how good they are. But the person that I actually use for my admin, she focused on one thing, which was how much time am I going to release to go and write books and talk to people and stuff. So, in fact, without knowing it, you've quietly generated the only 5 reasons that anybody, and I mean anybody, would buy anything. An idea, a service, a product, this idea of being my channel. And luckily, it produces the word tires, spelt in the North American way, without the Y. So T, time saved, things will happen more regularly. Maybe things will be delayed. As a result of investing in this particular bond, the yield from the bond will come 3 years later, but it'll be higher. So we can actually combine things together. We can combine T and I, time and income. Maybe an SI. S is state. SI might be a situation. I'm a bit of a jacketaholic. I love buying expensive jackets. And when I wear my jackets, I feel good. And I perform better and generally make some more money. Mm-hmm. So TIRES, and R, what would you think that might stand for? Any idea? It's a bit
running away.
Running away, very close. Risk, pretty close. Yeah, and of course you might combine that RE. So when you bought your car, you know if you have an accident in a Mercedes, the result of a crash would be much less. Now, tyres are very fundamental because if somebody's selling technology or they're selling themselves, they've got to go through the whole process of saying, what would somebody take away from employing me? Would they be able to get a salesperson who produces results more quickly? They'd be buying tea. Would they be getting a salesperson that they'd have to invest less money in? They're less worried about time. So, in fact, in everything in life, there is a tyres test. And if you can actually, before you go in to talk to somebody, to influence them to buy you, to buy your ideas, or to buy whatever it is you'd like them to buy, and you know what their 5 buying drivers might be, then you just do what my old boss Willie Ross said, just have a good old discussion and see how you can help them. And you discuss their business and become genuinely interested, and you will find almost automatically that those TIRES things come out.
I think you taught us. Now you have a bigger one just before we go to commercial break. You have a bigger one?
Well, this is what we normally give our students, but frankly, Alfonso, your personality is so great, I thought I'd better give you a decent sized one.
Okay, this is the decent sized one. Trevor Wilkins, and I think you taught us how to sell ourselves to success today.
It's a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And more with Success by Design show after this.